having to make that choice that often comes with poverty, right? Making the choice between essentials. And about 5.4% of households were very food insecure in 2024. What's going on, y'all? Hope y'all doing marvelous as always, and welcome back to another session here. This is going to be from Out of the World Hunger series. We're going to go over the causes of food insecurity, right? It's one thing to know about, what the insecurities are, but now to know what the causes are, that's always important. Shouldn't be too long of a video, I'm saying? A lot of this info is pretty straightforward, beginning with poverty, right? Now, poverty is the primary driver of food insecurities, okay? Because poverty, essentially, when you live in poverty, it affects so many other things. It's like a chain of events, or like a whirlwind, or, just issues that compound on top of another. It affects your consumption, so how you eat food. It also affects your health, okay? Obviously, it also affects education too. So when you're living in areas of poverty, it may not be that you're getting the best education about nutrition, to keep you from going into food insecurities. Of course, going back to education, doctors also, nurses, they tend to be some of the most common people that we can get, advice about food from, right? But again, if you live in poverty, chances are, maybe you don't have insurance or you're not able to see a doctor. This poverty just affects a lot of things. And underneath that, I have what poverty also can lead to. One of the most common things that poverty leads to is choosing between certain essentials. As most people know, especially like right now, inflation is still kind of high. So right now people are having to choose between, paying their rent or gas, utilities, or groceries, right? And when you're having to choose, when you're not able to afford everything, you can become food insecure, especially if food, groceries, is not the essential that you decide to choose to spend your money on. Having to make that choice, that often comes with poverty, right? Making the choice between essentials. And about 5.4% of households were very food insecure in 2024. There's also high food costs that come with poverty. And even if you're not living in poverty, if you're doing okay, if you're doing, fairly decent, maybe you're in the middle class, perhaps, food increases, they still increase for everybody. But, those who make a little bit more and, who have a little bit more saved up, it may not necessarily hurt them as much. So now there's high food costs, though, that usually essentially applies to people in poverty, because food is always high to somebody who doesn't have a whole lot to work with. Then you have, oftentimes there's no safety nets for you. Now there may be some, which I'm going to get to later on. Now there's food deserts, right? So people who live in poverty tend to be in areas that, have food deserts, right? Like rural areas, for example, are some of the common ones I can think about. Areas where like maybe you live in, like the countryside or what have you. There's not a lot of grocery stores or supermarkets and things like that in the countryside. So, oftentimes, if you're able to grow your own food, if you're a farmer, then that's one thing, because, you can just simply grow your own food. If you don't have that capability and, you live in a rural area in the countryside somewhere, and you also happen to be living in poverty, likely you're living in what's called a food desert, right? You don't really have a market, around you. I know, believe it or not, I have family in South Carolina, right? Where they live at is there's like a IGA supermarket, like right down the street, but that's about it. It's that if you want to go to like your nearest Walmart or anything like that, you're looking at a good maybe, 20 or so minute travel, 20 to 30 minutes. Past the IGA supermarket is like just a load of just open stretch of road with train tracks on the side and, trees and things like that. If you know, that's country for you. See, I'm originally from New York, so like I'm not like, I'm used to the city, I guess I should say. I'm used to having availability of, markets and grocery stores and things like that all over, So, but, go down to South Carolina where my peoples live at, and you don't necessarily have a lot to work with. IGA down the street is one thing, but sometimes the IGA don't have everything that, they need. So, they may have to drive out into the city or like out in town or whatever, a good 30 minutes away from home. That also, leads me into transportation abilities here. With transportation abilities, again, if you live in like a rural area, or even if you do live in the city, in order for you to get to certain foods, to get to certain markets or what have you, to get foods, you gotta drive there or maybe take public transportation, right? Take a bus. If you live in like New York City, you would take a cab, right? Maybe, or you take the subway, the underground, subway and whatnot. So it just depends, that poverty, though, if you're living in poverty specifically, that can affect your transportation abilities. Or again, maybe having to choose between places. If you do have a car and maybe you don't have a lot of gas or what have you, just as an example, there's a whole lot of different scenarios when it comes to people living in poverty. Then the next thing we have, the next cause is lack of awareness, which can essentially go back to education or lack thereof, right? So when you're not aware of, what food insecurities are, if you're not aware of the types of foods that, the types of nutritious foods, I should say, that your body requires and needs from you, if you're not aware about like the macros and the micronutrients and what they do for your body, the purpose behind them all and why it's important to, once you understand those things, get the nutritious food your body needs, then, lack of awareness, essentially that can, lead you to being food insecure. Like on my channel, I talk, all up and down my channel about nutrition, especially throughout the 100 series. I talk at length about, carbs, proteins, and fats. I also talk about all the vitamins, minerals, and what they do to your body and like what purpose they serve in your body, I should say, as well as if there's any deficiency or if there's any toxicity diseases or symptoms at that. I also go over the limits, how much you should be intaking, as the average person, the recommended dietary allowance. I go over all of that. That's going to lead me into the next one, instability. I covered this in 201, right, where I talked about the 4 dimensions of food securities, and stability is a dimension, right? It's one of the 4 dimensions I went over. So instability essentially is affecting your ability to be able to sustain getting foods. Like it's affecting your ability to consistently get food, consistently obtain and be able to buy and consume nutritious foods. Like price hikes, for example. Also, price hike is an instability, right? Price hikes may affect, especially if you live in poverty, you combine some of these other causes of instability, price hikes that can affect your ability to be able to afford foods. Then there's conflicts, of course. Many of us know that one. Right now, actually, perfect example. We're kind of, dealing with conflicts right now. The one between, Iran and Israel and, the United States involvement. So for some of you that don't keep up with this, over there in the Middle East, there's a strait. It's like a small body of water. It's called the Strait of Hormuz. It aids in, logistical, processes and things, getting, goods, import, export. It's a strait that, the Middle East uses over there, specifically, especially, I should say, Iran, and even Israel. Having that strait, closed, having that strait, inaccessible, that kind of exacerbates, that in conflicts, that exacerbates people's abilities to also be able to get food. Because what happens oftentimes in conflicts is when 2 countries war with each other, or 2 regions or what have you, when they war with each other, one of the strategies that they may implement is starving out the opposition's people. That also leads to food insecurities. Syria is another good example. I think I'm going to cover that one later though, because there's a video about Pika that I want to go into, and I want to save that for a video by itself. I'm going to bring Syria into the mix too. It's something that I had, it's an assignment that I had when I was in school. I'm gonna save that for later. Then we have, now we go into the most affected. As you can imagine, some of the most affected people are obviously low-wage employees. So if you're not bringing in, a livable wage, that's gonna affect your ability to be able to buy foods too. Then you have single-parent households. Now, I believe I covered this though in the 4 dimensions of food securities. I covered this in 201. But normally, single-parent households is usually where the mother is the head of the household, right? Those are the households that suffer the most in food insecurities, because oftentimes moms, especially the single mom, when they're not getting any help, oftentimes the mothers themselves can be food insecure because they essentially make sure that all their kids eat, which means they may not, or maybe they're having to ration out food, which of course means your body doesn't get the full bed of nutrients that it should in order for like cellular processes, right? Cellular reproduction and things like that, or our reproductive systems, hormones, neurological transmissions and systems, right? Neurological health to avoid degeneration. All that stuff is important. Then there's children and older individuals. I also covered that in 201 as well. But, children and older individuals, they tend to be the most affected by food insecurities because children, obviously, they don't feed themselves. They don't necessarily buy their own food. They are children. That's the work of the parents, right? That's the job of them. That's their role. So older individuals, oftentimes, they don't, because they get older, there are things that older individuals need more of as opposed to somebody my age or in my age group, or even someone who's younger, right? Even children in the generations behind me. One of the common things they deal with, just as an example, is osteoporosis, right? Bones weakening as they get older. So in order to avoid that, they typically face an uptake of, or it's recommended, I should say, they face a recommendation of an uptick in vitamin D and even some calcium, because then that helps with, keeping your bones nice and strong and healthy. And you have certain racial populations. So obviously, going back to poverty, so Native Americans, they're the ones that suffer the highest in poverty, and then African Americans follow right behind it. However, African Americans, their food insecurity totaled a little over 24%. Then there's the Latin population, they follow behind at 20%, and white households were about 10%. While Native Americans, they suffer the highest in poverty, Black Americans suffer the highest in food insecurities in this country. So now there's rural and underserved urban areas, right? I covered a little bit of the rural, so that's like the countryside, big open fields, farms, or what have you. If you farm your own food, you're a little better off usually. But, if you happen to live in a rural area with no ability to farm your own foods, no ability to get foods at a supermarket or what have you, and then also underserved urban areas. So obviously areas that are predominant African American, they tend to be the ones that also face the highest poverty. And then we have interventions, right? Because of course you don't always talk about, it's one thing to talk about a problem, but it's always important to have some interventions and some resolutions. So that's what this section is here. So the most known intervention, and some of these are actually, utilized by the United Nations as well as the World Food Program. Income support. Now, you may already know what some of those are. They may come in the form of tax credits or cash assistance. Matter of fact, over the pandemic that we recently had, some years back, there was, there was that pandemic pay, right? The stimulus checks. That's a part of the income support, okay? For people who lose their jobs or maybe are, a little underpaid at that moment, they ended up getting stimulus checks to try to help them out as much as they could, because again, if you're still in a position where you live in poverty and you got to choose between essentials, maybe a stimulus check is only going to do so much for you. You have assistance programs. Now, some of y'all may know what those look like too. One of the most common ones in this country happens to be welfare and people who are on SNAP, right? SNAP beneficiaries, people who, get food stamps. Now you have community interventions. So that may look like building a supermarket. There's a wide range of, stores, around here where I am, but, there are some international markets though for me to go to. I know there's two actually not far from where I live here. So there's still international markets where if you want to go and get you the foods that you may not find in like a Walmart or in like a Target or what have you, wherever you shop. And also there's farmers markets. That's also a community intervention, right? If you have a farmers market, always make sure you support your local farmers markets too. It's one thing to go and, of course, get your groceries from a grocery store. You definitely still need to do that, but definitely make sure you support your local farmers markets, right? Because they farm their own food. Farmers are going through a bit of a crisis right now with crops and, the pricing, inflation, things like that. And so definitely support your local farmers markets. I definitely do. I get a lot of honey from there. I may get me some in the summertime. I get watermelon from my local farmers market. I try to support them as much as I can because, being a farmer, especially right now, is not easy. So I try to throw my support where I can. But that's a community intervention. Now we have policy directives. So we have affordable housing is one, affordable healthcare, education. Okay, those are all policy directives. So, of course, those are, just policies that come up maybe in the House or the Senate or even in your local governments, right? Statewide. Just as an example, I talked about this in one of my 100 series, sessions. I believe it was the one where I talked about the fast food to homemade meals comparisons. But here in Virginia, our previous governor he switched the food tax, right? He went ahead and lowered the food tax down to 1%. So as long as you go into a grocery store and you're getting food, then you'll only pay that 1% tax. Obviously, if you get something that's not food related, then you're gonna pay the extra 6 or whatever it is percent. It was a start, I guess, and but that's a policy directive, of course. So it can start at your local, in your maybe in your mayor's office if you live in a certain city, and then all the way up to governor level, and then state senators, state representatives, things like that, all the way up to the federal level. So then there's also education. So education applies to different people, right? It applies to farmers, women, and children in schools, right? Now I wrote this here in bold, the example from session 115 regarding the child, right? So in that session there was I shared a video where it was a TikTok video where a mother was feeding her son, a tray of food, and it was like kiwis, blueberries, some meat on there, and it was some other things. But one of the things that she said in the video, like she wrote, one thing I don't feed my baby is carbs. Like why would you want to feed that to a kid? And that's where the education comes into play, especially for children. See, children, they don't stay children forever. Children eventually got to grow, and in order for them to grow, they need those macronutrients, right? Carbs, fats, and proteins, they all serve a purpose. Regardless of what age you are, they serve a purpose. Now, obviously, it's bad to overconsume, right? Consuming in excess, that's always bad for you. Whenever you hear somebody talk about moderation, that's what they mean, is a balance. It focuses on not eating too little and then not eating too much. You gotta eat just right. Now, sometimes that may look like a serving size, right? If you're lucky enough, you eat something, you may see a serving size, and then you just, eat whatever the serving size is, or maybe you can have more than just one, just depending on like what you get, out of that serving size, how much protein, fats, carbs, all that stuff that you may get, sodium even, cholesterol. Even still, right, saying stuff like that can it can do a few things, right? As a child, they don't really understand that, right? So, you could be giving them a complex of sorts. They could be looking at like, they may want to go to a pizza party and, because of how you've conditioned their mindset about carbs, they're kind of that lone kid that, isn't enjoying any pizza, not able to enjoy, anything that, even if it's something they don't have often, they may just think like, oh, I can't have that, what I'm saying? And that's not a good condition, what I'm saying? Because then that can lead to other more chronic issues, such as, some of the eating disorders that I talked about also in my session 100 series, that being binge eating disorder, or that being anorexia, things like that. Okay, so it's important to, education, right? That's always important. Okay, now education can come in different forms. I already mentioned doctors and nurses. If you're able to see a doctor or a nurse, if you got a good insurance. But even if not, this is if you're not faced with poverty or any other issue that can stop you from this. But maybe you can see a physical, fitness trainer, what have you. You can go to a gym, see your local fitness trainer, right? And there's also nutritionists, right? Nutrition coaches, things like that, right? So they'll all be able to help you. And also, you do your own research. You do your own research, peer-reviewed studies, what I'm saying? Make sure that the source is valid and credible always. But, you can do your own research and you'll be able to find that out. I mean, hell, even if you're watching my video, then, I have a whole channel full of videos that, go over a lot of these things, at length. Education about different things, nutrients especially. Some fitness, but a lot of nutrients. And that is going to be the end of my video. So this has been session 202, causes of food insecurities, and I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a like, hit that thumbs up button. Any questions, comments, concerns, please go ahead and hit my comment section, and then also make sure to give me a subscribe. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, and thank y'all very much. Hope y'all enjoy the rest of y'all day. Take care. See y'all on the next one.